testify and be as brief as you possibly can. If you don't, I will probably hurry you, because we've got 10 bills to hear. I've dragged on the committee the last couple of weeks about getting it done quicker than I thought they could. We're going to prove it today with my help. So we will open our first hearing. Will be on House Committee Substitute, House Bill 112, Representative Franklin. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Diane Franklin. I serve the 123rd District, which is portions of Camden and McLeod counties. I bring to you today House Bill 112, and this is enabling legislation that allows the healthcare disciplines to join together with their monies to do some survey work on where healthcare providers are in the state, what levels that we have. The nurses do this on an annual basis, and it produces some pretty good information about where the ages of the nurses, the kinds of nurses that we have are in the state of Missouri. And so we have to do that for all healthcare professions as we move forward and make decisions about healthcare access. This information, this data, would be vital in guiding that process. So that is the introduction of it, and if you have any questions, I do have one witness.
So basically what you're saying here is when we talk about rural areas, underserved areas, this sort of thing, this would kind of bring up the numbers and tell us exactly what we're talking about.
That is exactly right.
Do all of the boards or professions have to do this? Is it where we put them all to have to do it, or is it at their choice?
It is a voluntary submission of their information.
Okay. All right, if you have a witness, please, whoever wishes to testify in favor of House Committee Substitute House Bill 112, please come forward.
I will add, Mr. Chairman, that this past interim, I did a committee on healthcare workforce, and so this is where we saw this presentation for the first time and recognized its value. Thank you.
All right. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Rice, and I'm the Director of the Office of Social and Economic Data Analysis at the University of Missouri. In order to plan for and assess Missouri's healthcare workforce, policymakers and planners require accurate, reliable, timely data. Missouri currently has no unified, consistent method in place to track across health professions in the context of Missouri's communities and our rural, suburban, and urban populations. The need for such information is heightened as not only our population ages and requires more healthcare, but as the healthcare provider population ages too. Particularly in rural areas, significant healthcare workforce shortages loom. To address this situation, a collaboration of healthcare educators, health professions and providers associations, health foundations, professional registration, and state departments overseeing and supporting healthcare workforce issues has determined the usefulness and viability of the Missouri Health Professions Workforce Data System. The data system will track trends and distribution of the workforce, inform healthcare workforce policy questions, inform training programs for healthcare workers, and identify emerging workforce issues. Examples of specific questions that could be answered through this process. How many and where are practicing physicians? How old are they? How long do they intend to practice? How many health workers trained in Missouri stay in Missouri? Are we training dentists at the appropriate rate to keep up with population growth? These are just a few of the questions that we would be able to answer on an ongoing and accurate basis. We believe a healthcare workforce data system will both enhance population health and improve the quality of Missouri's healthcare workforce. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. So if this were to pass, I take it possibly your organization or you might do some of the data compiling or putting together.
We've been working on the development of the idea, and we've done some prototyping. It would be an RFP.
You would bid it.
And we would be possibly bidding.
All right, any questions from the witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else testify in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kinda Island Missouri Nurses Association, we support this. I think it'd be good for our workforce staff.
And your organization does this today, correct?
Correct.
Okay, any questions for us? Thank you. Anyone else testify in favor?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, Scott Morris, Missouri Hospital Association, we're strongly in support.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lisa Christie with the Missouri Psychological Association in support of this bill.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Craig Stevenson, University of Missouri System, offer our support as well.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you. Anyone else testify in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 112? Seeing none, anyone testify against House Committee Substitute for House Bill 112? Seeing none, anyone testify for informational purposes only on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 112? Seeing none, Representative, the money that's in here will come out of the boards, not GR, correct?
That's correct. The fiscal note has 0.2 and to the amount that they had listed there, but the money will come out of the boards.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the hearing. That goes to the hearing on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 112. Next is House Bill 1052, Representative Rocky Miller. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Rocky Miller, District 124, Lake of the Ozarks area. I'll be quick. This is the same bill you already heard before about surveyors. This backs off the surveyor's language to make it where they don't have to do every single survey, every single easement in the state, and only if they property. And that's what it does.
Representative, as far as I know, and if you know any different, everybody's on board, right?
Yeah, we actually got this to go consent in the House.
Okay. I appreciate your work on it, personally.
Thank you.
This is something that needs to be fixed, and it certainly was not meant to cause a problem, and I certainly appreciate your work on it very much.
Thank you.
Anyone testify in favor of House Bill 1052?
Good afternoon, Brett Stewart with the electric cooperative. We support the bill.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else testify in favor?
Mr. Chairman, Mo McCallum, Missouri Society of Professional Surveyors. And I want to go on record, we want to go on record in favor, and we also want to thank everyone who participated and worked hard to get this.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Will. Appreciate it. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Trey Davis, registered lobbyist, president of the Missouri Energy Development Association, going on record in support.
Any questions? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Rick Telforce, president of the Missouri Telecommunications Industry Association. We'd like to go on record in support of the bill again as well. Thank you.
Any questions for this? Thank you very much. Next.
Mr. Chairman, Ewell Wasson, I'm with the registered lobbyist with the Missouri Association of Municipal Utilities, and we'd like to go on record in support of the bill.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Please file with this form. Anyone else testify in favor of House Bill 1052? Seeing none, anyone testify against House Bill 1052? With the procession we have coming up here in favor, I can't imagine who it would be. All right, anyone testify in for informational purposes only on House Bill 1052? Okay, you did get it out, and you'd probably like to keep it that way, would you not?
Yes, I would. Thank you, and thank you for the work you did, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everything you've done. That was the hearing on House Bill 1052. Next, we have Specifies substitute, House Bill 1098, Representative Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Crawford. I represent the 129th district. And I just want to mention up front, I believe you have a substitute bill for House Bill 1098 in front of you, so I'll speak to that if that's okay.
Please do.
Okay, under current law, we have banks that have trust powers, and we have non-deposit trust-only charters. The banks with the trust powers can branch to other states, but the non-deposit trust-only charters cannot. This will bring parity to the two. This bill only affects 5 non-deposit trust companies in the state, and this will allow them to have full service branching on a reciprocal basis with other states. This bill passed the House consent, and we discovered there was an error. We need to allow our various divisions of finance to be able to enter memorandums of understanding, and that's because states operate differently, so we need to make a way to make them.
So you had basically like a 1 or 2 word change here. Was all it was.
We had to make some changes due to the fact that different states operate differently. We needed to allow the Division of Finance to take care of that.
All right. Any questions for the sponsor? Anyone to testify in favor of simply substitute House Bill 1098?
Yes, Bill Radford, Missouri Bankers Association. We support this bill. Basically, the problem we run into, we look at these 5. Kansas has a $500,000 capital requirement. Missouri has $1 million capital requirement to start this. We have a representative office in Columbia for a Kansas trust, and we have a Missouri Bank trust that would like to go to Kansas. So we'd like you to be able to sit down. They've been in business for years. So the capital requirement is kind of a mute thing at this point because they've been working for a long time. So we think this can be worked out between the 2 divisions of finance to allow this to happen. So that's the reason for the change.
So you're trying to put a little common sense into banking regulations.
Yes, since regular banks, trust powers can do this stuff.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you very much. Anyone else to testify in favor? Seeing none, anyone to testify against simply substitute for House Bill 1098? Seeing none, anyone to testify for informational purposes only on House Bill substitute for House Bill 1098? I would assume even with change, you would like to, if possible, keep it consent.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That public hearing on House Bill substitute for House Bill 1098. So far, committee, you are good. House Bill 979, and this is where we may have a problem. It's going to be the Tony Duggar show. Representative Duggar, welcome. And it is House Bill 979.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for having me over today to present my legislative agenda.
Yeah, your entire slate.
For the record, my name is Tony Duggar. I represent the 141st District, which is Wright County in the eastern half of Webster County. House Bill 979 is a consent bill that came out of the House with a vote of 148-4. Currently in statute, the law requires that the treasurer of the 7-director school district to be bonded by 2 or more entities. All I'm doing is taking out the word 2 and putting in the word 1 for entities. And I think at the time that this law was passed, the bonding companies could not reach the total amount, and so they had to divide this up amongst bonding companies. Now bonding companies are big enough that they can cover it with just 1. So
the reason for doing it in the first place just isn't there.
Right. Okay. And that's all that's in the bill.
Okay, any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, is there anyone to testify in favor of House Bills 979? Seeing none, is there anybody to testify against House Bill 979? Seeing none, informational purposes only on 979. Seeing none, close the hearing on 979, and we move on to Representative Duggar on House Bill 533.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 533 deals with candidates filing for office. And as you know, at the end of candidate filing, if an incumbent comes in and withdraws, that filing is immediately opened up for 3 extra days. So what I'm doing with this bill is I'm putting a 7-day period in between the close of filing and when this filing would actually open up. This would allow the local newspapers in some of our rural areas to have time to put out a news article and let everyone know that filing has opened back up. This doesn't mess with the calendar as far as election days and all of that is in place. So, I mean, it just puts that 7-day period in there to give the local papers time to do an article to let everybody know the filing's open back up.
So if there is a problem, then you have a week for everybody to know what happened.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, anyone to testify in favor of, I guess it is now Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 530.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the sponsor for this bill, Doug Cruz with the Missouri Press Association, and we support the bill.
Okay, any questions for the witness? Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a question.
Oh, sorry, we did have a question.
Well, actually, for the sponsor, okay. Currently, is an incumbent withdrawals, it opens up 2 days, and you're making it 7 days?
No, I'm just putting a 7-day waiting period in between the time that it opens up, because now it opens up immediately.
Okay.
And so I'm just putting a 7-day waiting period in between that time.
And the advantage of that waiting period is what?
In many of the rural areas, there's only weekly newspapers. They come out once a week. They don't get information into the paper about the late file. And so adding these extra days adding one more week would allow the paper to at least cover that issue.
Well, could you just open it up for 1 more week?
That's basically what it is.
No, it's still a 3-day period. It still opens it up on Tuesday and closes it on Friday.
I guess what I'm asking is why wouldn't you just open it up for longer times to let the press tell the public that this is a longer time as opposed to a short amount of time? Why is that waiting period in the middle? I'm not understanding that. The advantage of that.
The advantage is to be able to publish it in the local papers. Right now, it opens up immediately.
Okay.
So when filing closes on Tuesday, if somebody walked in on Tuesday, or if an incumbent withdrew on Tuesday, say at 4 o'clock, and closing is at 5, and somebody else comes in and files in that last hour, it immediately opens up for 3 days.
Right.
But there's no way for the public to really know about that, because in the rural areas, the papers are a week.
Yeah, I guess I'm not asking my question correctly, because I guess what I'm saying is if you opened it up longer, you could still have it open immediately. So it would give the opportunity for everyone to still file.
Right, I mean, you could open it up for an extended period if you want to. I did in this bill, I left it at the same number of days and just put the week waiting period in there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Thank you. Anyone else to testify in favor of Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 533? Seeing none, anyone to testify against Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 533? Seeing none, anyone to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 533. Next, I believe, will still be Senator Representative Duggar, and it will be House Bill 64.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 64 deals with the small loan originations. These loans are normally loans from $2,500 up to $50,000. Currently in law, you're allowed to charge a fee of $75 or up to 10% of the principal. What I'm doing in this bill is I'm just increasing the $75 to $100, and I'm leaving the 10% in place. So it's been several years since they've had an increase. They really do not make a lot of money on these small loans. So that's all I'm doing is increasing the $75 fee up to $100, and I'm leaving the 10% in place.
Okay. Questions for the sponsor? Who is it you're raising on?
It's going to be like the small loans. It's not payday loans. It's probably like installment loans and stuff like that.
We had a bill somewhat similar to this.
We passed this in a bill a couple of years back that it got vetoed.
Okay. Did the bill itself get vetoed, or was it in something that got vetoed?
It was in something that got vetoed.
All right. Any questions? Anyone to testify in favor?
Mr. Chairman, Harry Gallagher, I represent Missouri Financial Services Association. Association is about 65 years old, and back when, before the days of credit cards, there were about 60 to 70 companies making these types of loans. Typically would be a furniture store, appliance store, or a personal loan. The loans could go higher than, depending on the credit rating of the individual, could go higher than $20,000. But typically, it would be more like the sponsor said. Chapter 40 or Section 408 140 is not like a whole lot of your other statutes. It tells you what you can do, not what you can't do. And the items in the bill, you have a list of about 10 or 12 of things that these companies can do and can't do anything else.
So you're testifying in favor of raising your...
Yes, and the original origination fee goes back to the 80s. It was increased, it was $50 and then around 15 years ago to maximum of $75 and a 10% limit, of course. And basically what we're dealing with here is inflation. Many times these loans are paid off in fairly short order, and the company loses money on it. Is the reason for the origination fee. So be pleased to try to.
Harry, we had a bill that raised several fees that we've already passed out of the Senate. This isn't like that at all.
No, there are only like 12 or 13 of these companies left in Missouri.
All right. Any questions for the witness?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else testify in favor? House Bill 64.
Matthew Reedy with the Missouri Independent Bankers Association, here in favor of this bill. Since Dodd-Frank came on, the cost of keeping up with compliance in banks my family size, about a $46 million bank. We pay over $100,000 a year to our employees to keep up with compliance with Dodd-Frank. This little bit of increase would help us catch up with that, just a slight, tiny bit. And it costs us $150 to $200 per loan we write for these small loans like that. And a lot of times the loan's only $500. Well, you can only charge 10%. You know, you
Would
can't
you
charge
say that a
over
bank like yours might be tempted to make more of these small loans with this instead of going with a payday loan?
We try.
One of the reasons that bigger banks won't do those kind of small loans.
It's the lifeblood of what we do. We can help out the guy who needs to, you know, just get his kid's school clothes and.
I mean, that would make sense to me if you're losing money on paperwork, you don't want to do the loan.
Exactly. We're just doing it to be a service to the community.
Okay. All right. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else to testify in favor?
Mr. Chairman, Craig Workfelt, Missouri Bankers Association, we support the legislation too, for a bunch of reasons already stated.
Okay, any questions for us? Thank you. Anyone else testify in favor? Seeing none, anyone to testify against House Bill 64? Seeing none, anyone to testify for informational purposes only on House Bill 64? I close the hearing on House Bill 64. Yeah, we're going to take a vote right quick, Representative. Roll call, or not roll call. Thank you.
Senators Wasson.
Here.
Cunningham.
Here.
Begeman.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Riddle. Sayer. Wallingford.
Here.
Wheeland.
Here.
Kevney.
Here.
Svoboda.
Here.
Sifton.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum established. Now we will move to House Committee substitute for House Bill 587. Representative Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 587 is identical to a bill that you are currently carrying that has already passed out of this committee and out of the Senate. It's a $200 fee increase for the consumer lenders to the Department of Finance to pay for the auditing requirements. The way it's set up, the banks work off of a formula in the It's adjusted how much that they pay in. These are set in statute and they can't be changed unless we change them. And so what's happening is the banks are picking up the cost of these audits. So this is just to try to help level out the playing field.
Representative, my apologies, I got the two bills confused, because this is the one we have already heard
Yes,
and passed out. So
yes.
I'm always confused. So, any questions? This is one we've already passed out, said and heard, raising fees on basically your small loan companies. And I think keeps the banks from paying a little more, keeps them from paying more than their fair share. These guys haven't been raised since, as I recall, in the late 1980s. And they ought to be paying their share of regulation. Banks should be paying off theirs also. So that's why we've done it already. That's already been passed out here. Any questions for the witness or for the sponsor? Seeing none, anyone to testify in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Rich Hyman with the Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. Just going to go on record to support the bill. Answer any questions you have.
And in your opinion, what I clumsily tried to explain, well, right now the banks are probably paying more than their fair share of the regulations. This brings these guys up.
That is correct. We're trying to make sure that each regulated entity type is paying the appropriate amount for regulation.
Any questions for witnesses? Thank you. Anyone else to testify in favor?
Craig Overfeld, Missouri Bankers Association, will go on the record in support of the bill.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else?
Matthew Review with Missouri Independent Bankers Association. We are in favor of this bill.
Any questions? Thank you. You have to fill out another witness form. Okay. Anyone else testify in favor? House Committee substitute for House Bill 587. Seeing none, anyone testify against House Committee substitute for House Bill 587? Seeing none, anyone testify for informational purposes only? That will close the hearing on House Committee substitute for House Bill 587. Next is House Bill 341.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 341 deals with the campaign financial reports that we file with the Ethics Commission. This bill would require that anybody who has to file this report has to file it online. It also eliminates the duplicate reporting that we have to report not only online, but back with our local election authorities as well. It would eliminate that duplicate reporting that we're required to do. So basically, anyone who's required to file a report would have to file it online.
Okay. Have you ever got the question of what if somebody doesn't have the ability to do that?
No, I haven't had that posed to me, just straightly out, but I think in this day and time, with the computers that are in libraries, computers, in the local election authorities' offices, I think that it's quite available for everyone to get some access.
You can figure out how to run your office, you can probably figure out how to do it. Senator Hayden, I think you were first.
Yeah, just a quick question. Tony, on this, excuse me, representing on this, is there anything that says that the county clerks, the election authorities would have to provide that information if somebody would come in and desire, even though it's online? I think most county clerks would do that as a service, but does it say anything?
I don't have anything in here that would require that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Kevin,
I noticed in the bill that the section 5, let's see, page 2, the fourth point down, in the case of all other offices, the appropriate officer shall be the Missouri Ethics Commission. Are you required committee people to file with MACC?
Not if they're not required to file now.
Well, they're required to file with the local authority.
But are they required to file campaign finance reports?
I think they are with the local authority.
All right, then they would be required. In most areas of the state, they don't file.
Okay.
I mean, you have to spend, is it $500?
That's right.
Yeah, you can have 56 irritated people.
Okay. Any other questions for the sponsor? All right, anyone to testify in favor of House Bill 341?
Chairman?
Yes.
I want to take this opportunity to say I think this is a really good bill. Thank you. It may differ your next bill, so I want to make sure I.
All right, anyone to testify in favor?
I'm Wendy Lauren, I'm the county clerk of Boone County, and answer a couple of questions. The county clerks do have agreements with the Missouri Ethics Commission that people can utilize our system to look things up. That was done when we originally had electronic filing, and in addition, people can use our systems in order to file with them. So I want to make sure that, that people do have access to computers through our office.
So you would
I do support this. One of the problems we're running into, because it's voluntary, some candidates do it, some candidates don't. There's unequal access to the forms, but some of them are in the mail for 2 or 3 days. We want to put everybody on a level playing field.
Okay. Please go out with the any questions? Please go out with the floor. Anyone else testify in favor? Seeing none, anyone testify against House Bill 341? Anyone to testify for informational purposes only on House Bill 341? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on House Bill 341, or House essentially substitute House Bill 341. House Bill 341. Now we move on to House Bill 30, and you want to hear this together? I think we'll hear them together. House Bill 30 and HJR 1. This is on voter ID, and we've heard it over. I assume this is the exact same bill.
You know, I
It's
think
not
we-
quite the same. Okay. All
Uh,
right. You can take it.
Mr. Chairman, I do think that the HJR, if I'm correct, Senator Krause, it's exactly the same as you heard earlier in your session. However, House Bill 30 is a little bit different. House Bill 30 basically sets up the guidelines that if the voters were to pass the HJR and allow the use of the photo ID in the state, House Bill 30 would be the guidelines by which we would follow to implement that. The ID requirements that I would use, or that I've used in House Bill 30, would be a non-expired Missouri driver's license, a non-expired or non-expiring Missouri non-driver's license, or a document issued by the United States or the state of Missouri containing the name of the individual, the signature which conforms to the most recent signature in the individual's voter registration record, a photograph, and an expiration date. Also, any ID that would be issued by the Missouri National Guard, the U.S. Armed Forces, or the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. I do have some exceptions in this bill for physical and mental disability or handicap, the inability to pay for a birth certificate or for other supporting documentation, a religious belief against photo ID, or if you were born on or before January 1st, 1949. And these people that would meet these exceptions that would not have a photo ID would be allowed to cast a provisional ballot, at which time the election authority would check that signature against the signature that they have on file in their voter registration records, and if it matches up, then that ballot would then be counted. It would also require the Secretary of State to provide advance notice of the ID requirements. It would require the state to provide at least one form of ID that I've listed here that would be required to vote. And it would take out the cost so that no cost would be sent down to the local level, to the local election authorities. The cost would all be paid by the state for this implementation. Also, on the House side, an amendment was added that basically would require the state to pay for any of the documentation, or at least one form of documentation that might be required to get the underlying documentation. So I'm glad to try to answer any questions.
Okay, questions? Senator Lozar.
It sounds like the exemptions are the major difference between this, not only this bill and the Senate bill, but also this bill and the ones that we've done for the last 10 years.
I believe my exemptions are the same as the bill I presented here last year.
Okay, then what is different about this bill than the one last year?
Mine is basically the same, except with the amendment that got added in the House that would pay for the underlying documentation.
That's it, that's the only difference.
That's the only difference, other than I changed the age up to 65 again. I added a year,
okay,
so that we would be at 65.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, okay.
I noticed in the bill, all election and credit costs associated shall be reimbursed from general revenue by appropriation. If there's no appropriation, then election authorities shall not enforce voter ID. I see in 2017, we're talking about $12 million. So if we don't appropriate $12 million in the next budget, then we're not going to voter ID.
I don't believe the cost was that high. The cost of the election was $7 million.
Okay, so $5 million for the ID.
That's possible, yeah. But the cost of the election is built into this. I would assume the election will be held in November, or obviously there would be no cost.
That the election is $7 million, $7,000 on every bill I've seen.
Right.
So
So I think that cost is in that 12 million that you're talking about.
Okay, so then to get the ID, it's going to be 5?
Right, it's, right. And with the underlying amendment that got added in the House that pays for the underlying documentation to pay, to get the documents that you need,
Yeah.
that raised the cost.
So I guess the point of my question, how are we going to know that the appropriation fund, how much the elections are, or the IDs are going to cost? Are we just going to pick a number and throw it in there?
Well, I don't know how you would be exact at it. I mean, you don't know until you know how many people are going to need the documentation.
Right.
I mean, there's just no way of knowing.
I mean, yeah, and the numbers are all over the map. I mean, 250,000 people to 0. I've heard them all. That's why I'm trying to put that this photo ID is subject to appropriation. How are we going to get that number? Is it 5 million? Is it 1 million? Who's to say? The budget chair?
I'm assuming that will be correct. I mean, somebody's asking to put the number, to put it in the budget.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Kraus.
Representative, are you familiar with how many IDs have been issued in Kansas once they went to voter ID?
You know, I don't have that number.
Well, the number is about 500, and it has been in business for a while. So there's nothing, this theory that we're going to have 200,000 IDs issued is probably not likely. It's really probably more maybe twice what Kansas is, because we're a little bit bigger than they are. We're looking at 1,000 IDs that we have to actually pay for. And I don't think it's going to be anywhere near. Now look at this one though, and most of this one came from our Secretary of State's office, and it's mailing and advertising that we have photo ID. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, anyone to testify in favor of House Bill 30 and HJR 1?
Chairman, committee, my name is Chairman Katie, with Missouri Alliance for Freedom. Just want to go on record in support of both HB 30 and HJR 1.
Any questions? Thank you.
Why would you be in support of this?
Why would we be in support of this bill? To protect our elections, the integrity of our elections.
Do you think our elections are out of integrity now, or
I think
what do you see as the
it's,
problem?
I think it's difficult to tell. I believe that there is, well, we do know that fraud is taking place. Whether or not it's impersonation fraud is difficult to tell because our elections are anonymous.
How do we know that, how do we know that?
Well, we don't. I don't think you can find that.
Thank you. We don't know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Thank you. Mr. Allen, anyone else testify in favor of House Bill 30 and HJR 1? Seeing none, anyone testify against House Bill 30 and HJR 1?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm John Scott from the Secretary of State's office. Our office testified against the bill last year. I'm here to do the same. I've testified against the Senate bills in the past as well, including this session. Here to do the same this year. Position on this issue hasn't changed. We're strongly against any legislation that would disenfranchise a single eligible Missouri voter. That's the way we view this legislation. As the chief elections authority in the state, it's the Secretary of State's job to make sure that only eligible voters vote, but also that every eligible voter has the opportunity to vote. So that being said, what I typically try to do when I testify against this legislation is to talk about the bigger picture and what the legislation does. So the first thing I'll say is the legislation revisits an issue that was decided by courts in the state 9 years ago in the Weinshank decision, where it said that similar legislation was an undue burden on a fundamental right, and that the legislation wasn't narrowly tailored enough to accomplish the compelling state interest. I don't know if you're familiar with the strict scrutiny concept, but that's more of a court thing. But we are talking about legislation that's unconstitutional as written. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the HJR, is to say, okay, the courts have said that we can't do it this way because of our strong constitutional protection. So let's weaken the voting rights. The legislation would weaken the voting rights provisions that we currently have to allow for what we view as the most restrictive photo ID legislation in the country. You know, and I can go into examples of why the legislation is what we believe to be the most restrictive in the country, but it really is just that. We've talked about a lot of numbers. We've talked about, you know, the amount of folks who don't have the ID or the ability to get the ID that the legislation contemplates in the past. Households without vehicles, people who take public transportation to work, Missourians over the age of 75, college students, Missourians in poverty. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that would be affected by this legislation. And the way that the bill addresses that fact doesn't provide adequate protection to those voters. It puts them on a pathway to a provisional ballot and subjects their vote to, basically puts their vote at risk. And that's not something that our office can support. So to say that a provisional ballot is an adequate safeguard, or that the exemptions that have been put into the bill are adequate safeguards, doesn't line it up to the facts. In our view, we're not supportive of the legislation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for us? Yes, Mr. Rose.
Thank you for your testimony. We've heard this bill. I'm wondering if I've heard it 11 years since I've been in the legislature. Now we don't even have anyone saying that there's fraud, there's something happened in New Mexico. We don't even have that anymore. We just have, here's the bill, and we'll check freedom. And part of freedom is probably allowing people to vote. And so your objection and the Secretary's objection is it just impedes someone's ability to vote, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
that's the basic part of it.
That's right.
We put exemptions in, but there's somebody along the way who's not going to have their constitutional right to vote. We don't. What do we know what the numbers is, even with all these exemptions?
Well, what we've said in the past is that there are over 200,000 Missourians that wouldn't have or have the ability to obtain the ID, the very narrow form of ID that's required by the legislation. That's what we've said in the past. And again, just to reiterate, we can't support any legislation that would disenfranchise a single eligible Missouri voter. That's the
And that, I think that's the crux of the argument, because you could put exemptions in for seniors, you change the number, that may catch some of the people.
And to call it an exemption, sorry to interrupt.
Well, I guess the point is, a lot of these people aren't voting anyway, but why we're making legislation to not allow them to vote doesn't make sense. So that's really the crux of, we'll hear it again. I guess it's like Christmas. Every year we're gonna have an event called voter ID. We'll probably hear about it on the floor. We're gonna have all the different discussions. The point of it is, there's someone along the way in Missouri who has constitutional right to vote who's not going to be because of this bill.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Kraus.
So currently, you don't believe there's any fraud in the system?
I'm sorry?
You don't believe there's any fraud in the election system right now?
Are you talking specifically voter impersonation fraud, or are you talking just generally that?
General and more specific.
Okay, well, I mean, our office has started an elections integrity unit that's been up for a year and a half now, and we've responded to complaints about voter fraud related to absentee ballot fraud, experiences at the polling place, and so, we've never said that, or we're not saying that fraud just generally can't happen in elections. What we're saying is that we're serious about it, and, to say that this legislation is,
So you just said fraud can happen in elections, and you don't want to take the safety measures in place to put a requirement to show a picture to verify that you are who you say you are?
we're not supportive of legislation that disenfranchises voters, period.
Tell me about disenfranchising. You have free ID opportunity right here that we're willing to pay for. How does it disenfranchise anybody if you offer them an opportunity to get a free ID?
Are you familiar with exactly how it would work to get the identification center?
I'm sorry, are we on a cross-examining?
No, I wanted to visit with you about it.
Testify, and I asked you a question, then you asked me a question. And then the point, you need to understand, okay, so you said.
I'm happy to answer your question.
You said there was fraud, and I'm saying that you don't want to take every step to make sure that fraud doesn't happen. And I asked basically that photo ID is a simple requirement. We provide a free ID. We protect the safeguards of our election, and you are opposed to it because it disenfranchises potential voters. And I said, how can that be disenfranchising? Offer them a free ID.
I'm saying it's possible to be against fraud and to be against disenfranchising people at the same time.
I don't believe that we're disenfranchising anyone. I think that at the end of the day, this protection is integrity of our election. We've got a method to allow you to get a free ID. Currently, in order to get any, most of your social benefits, you have to have an ID. Most people have IDs today, even cash and check, you have to have an ID. If you don't have an ID, I'm surprised that they don't have IDs. And if they don't, there's an opportunity for them to get one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions for the witness? Thank you. Anyone else testify against?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, allocation of the Missouri NEA was voting against similar provisions in this and previous sessions. And, our members all work for elected officials, many of them teach government. My legislative committee members care about this process. We would concur, I think, with the testimony that the gentleman heard. My members look at the White case, they look at concern over that the existing constitutional provision seems to provide the appropriate protection. I just want to bring the committee's attention to a concern. I just hope you all will take a moment to really seriously think about what the bill, House Bill 30, does. And this is following on the question of Senator Kesney. This bill actually says, in a section that describes the process by which a person would show verification for election, it actually says that the election authority costs would be subject to reimbursement by the General Assembly through general revenue. And then it says that there is no appropriation, that the election authority shall not enforce the photo identification requirements of this section. As a matter of legislative practice, the idea that we wouldn't have clarity in this section of law as to whether or not these provisions would apply should probably be a concern to the legislature. There probably ought to be a process designed, and we've seen other bills start to move in terms of designing some kind of ID process that wouldn't be so of concern that you would have to be worried about contingent effectiveness and appropriations. But the idea that this fundamental law would be subject essentially to appropriations and that we wouldn't know from year to year, election to election, what the law of the land would be, that I think should be a concern to us as a state and to you all as the legislature. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Senator Malone?
So, Otto, what you're highlighting is one
Page
year.
2, lines 26 to 30.
Yeah, so 1 year there could be an appropriation and we would enforce photo ID, and then 1 year they want it and we wouldn't enforce it, even though the people, I mean, potentially you could have a situation where the people in Missouri vote, they actually want photo ID, but they did not enforce it because we say
General
no.
Assembly to appropriate.
Right. Yeah.
So as a matter of legislative practice, it seems like there, and we've seen other bills that take a different approach in terms of different specifications, and then just say that's the law, and so there's clarity.
It seems that the fact that we don't have a photo ID right now is questioning the integrity of our elections, and how dare we do that, we should probably pay for it. I mean, is that what I don't know if you're saying that.
That's actually, I mean, the nature of our testimony in this case is, the general arguments still exist in terms of the concern of the particulars of the way this sketches out ID requirements. But moreover, this bill introduces an additional concern, and that is, we don't have clarity as to what the law will be.
Yeah.
Because it'll vary depending upon what future legislatures decide to do in terms of appropriations.
And I guess what I'm thinking is if this body and people in Missouri think it's that important, we should pay for it.
And, in particular, most of this stuff is really falls down to our county election authorities to implement. They also will have to wonder, what law am I going to be implementing? And what do I do if it says that the photo ID requirement shall not be implemented? What do I do?
Yeah. Right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the witness?
Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, or afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sarah Rossi, the Director of Advocacy and Policy for the ACLU of Missouri. Most of my opposition testimony was going to be pretty much what the Secretary of State's office said. I do want to focus specifically on what has changed between the Supreme Court decision of 2006 and now. And what has changed between then and now is nothing. The court found in 2006 that there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud. They found that these voter ID bills will be a severe burden on eligible voters, and that these bills do not serve any compelling state interest in protecting the integrity of the vote. The court in 2006 was very clear that the Missouri Constitution already thoroughly protects the right to vote. In fact, Missouri's Constitution goes further than federal protections for the right to vote. And the requirements for voting in Missouri were made clear in the Constitution, were made clear in that decision. Is that you have to be 18 or over, and you have to reside in the state or the political subdivision in which you're voting. Nothing has changed since then. These bills are not necessary. There hasn't been any widespread evidence of voter fraud, and the number of people that would be disenfranchised by these laws far outweighs the supposed protection they would provide. I do want to say one thing. I understand that the estimates are about 200,000 people that this would disenfranchise, and Kansas has a similar bill, and they've only had to pay for, I think we said 1,000 IDs at this point, but that still leaves 199,000 people who didn't get the ID and now cannot vote. We should be aiming for 100% voter turnout. We should be aiming for everybody to exercise their constitutional right to vote, and whatever prohibits that, we shouldn't be passing. I can see that there are some questions that are very important to some senators right now, so I'll be quiet and let those questions get asked.
Any questions from the witness? Thank you. Oh, Senator Crouch.
Are you aware that in states that pass voter ID turnout is going up?
I have to look that up. I'm not going to take your word for it, sir.
Well, please look it up because that was one of my talking points when I presented the bill last year and the year before that. It's interesting, probably not in every state, but in the majority of states, the voter turnout actually went up when people felt that their vote wasn't going to be potentially, they were more concluding disenfranchised because other people were trying to change the election by maybe impersonation fraud. And the 200,000 people that currently don't have IDs, I believe that we have to done by the Secretary of State's office, and I think that some of the roles have been people that could have been moved out of the state and they didn't have an active ID from the state of Missouri or those kind of things. So that it's hard to determine if that is a real number out there. In Kansas, it was 500. I doubled that because the state of Missouri is a little larger than Kansas. Thank you.
Any other questions from the witness? Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else testify against?
I'm Wendy Norton, I'm the county clerk of Boone County, and I hate testifying against my good friend's bill, but we have a long-standing disagreement on this issue. I was an election official when the original identification requirements were in effect. In fact, Ms. Weinshank is one of my voters. She went to court after she and I attempted to work out the problem she had in acquiring identification. These are very real problems that some people have. I have a significant problem in that we, not just that we're requiring identification. This is not a photo ID. For example, someone who's come to school in my community who has a Kansas driver's license would not be eligible to vote under this. It's a photo ID. When you say people have to have a photo ID to do this, that would be accepted by TSA, that would be accepted by a bank, that would be accepted. But under this particular version, it would not be accepted in order to vote. And I consider those people residents of my county, they're counted by the Census Bureau, they pay taxes. This is not a photo ID bill. This is a Missouri Department of Revenue ID. Pure and simple. Calling it photo ID gives a mistaken impression. Let's talk about somebody who loses their purse the weekend before the election. We have lots of parts of this where there are unintended consequences that you will eventually regret. What if we have a job one 2 weeks before a presidential election? All of those identification papers those people have are scattered. You're putting in such strict requirements, we cannot overcome the problems in that kind of catastrophe. Talk about Kansas. Some wayward child who goes off to KU mistakenly thinking that's a good place to go. That ID was taken. My counterpart in Kansas, in Lawrence, is authorized to create identification for people. Kansas had a much less strict authorization. We talked about this, Senator, on having the local official be able to issue identification for people. I don't like the fact that women have a bigger hurdle under this than men. That has been always one of my problems with this. Women have to get a birth certificate. If they got married and changed their name, they have to get a marriage license. If they got a divorce and remarry, they have to get divorce papers. They have to get new marriage papers. Guys who don't change their name, they're kind of like me. I didn't change my name. I had too many yard signs when I got married. I've already invested. You know what about? Get rid of all of them. But that is a different level. So we aren't just talking about IDs. We're talking about two different sets of requirements. One for one group of people and one for a different group. And those are the kinds of things that I don't believe in. I was the first person in this state to require identification at the polling place. I wrote the original law and had sponsors for it in 1983. So I could request identification at the polling place. But we cannot make this identification so strict that in certain situations we can't overcome, that it becomes a barrier to voting. I am opposed to fraud. There is fraud. There is fraud in absentee balloting. There has been fraud in voter registration. There's been fraud in petitions. I've seen this over the years. There's no question about that. The key that we have to make, you have to make as lawmakers, I have to make as an administrator, is balancing the interests of our voters. Protecting, and it is a balance. You cannot open the system so much that you would allow fraudulent ballots. You can't tighten the system so much that you prohibit valid voters from being able to cast a valid ballot. I think this goes too far in that direction. Yeah, as the representative knows, he and I both agree that Representative McGaw's bill over in the House is a good compromise between those two things. I do support that. I would hope that you all would entertain incorporating that bill rather than this one into your deliberations. Is there any questions?
Any questions, Woods? Thank you. Anyone else testify against House Bill 30 and HJR?
Good afternoon. My name is Martin Sands, and I'm from Independence, Missouri, home of various children from Sonship. And here to represent the 750,000 members of ARP. I've been an ARP member since 1999, served as an advocacy member and a member of the Speakers Bureau. In addition, I served as election judge and currently served as supervisory election judge and served these capacities for the last 13 years. There are a number of reasons why this bill, HB 30, should not even be considered or worse, be encouraged in this community. First, it's far and away unconstitutional. It has the potential to disenfranchise over 200,000 U.S. citizens of the constitutional and legal right to vote in the election held in the state of Missouri. Now, I understand that the often used excuse for this and other previous legislation is voter fraud. Missouri does not have, nor has ever had, a serious issue with voter fraud. As a matter of fact, the Green Center for Justice has done extensive studies in every state of the union, has concluded that voter fraud is less than 0.03% to 1%, Senator Krause, less than 0.03% to 1%. In addition, 2012 national study has found only 10 alleged cases of in-person voter impersonation in any election in the United States since 2000. I can think about that for just a moment. Any election over the 12-year period that's held in every state in the union, and only 10 cases of any kind of impropriety that was done. Think of the millions of votes that were taken, and you only found 10. Now we're talking less than millions of votes, okay? Maybe 30%. Article 8, Section 2 of the Missouri Constitution and the 15th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees every citizen the right to vote in any election. Voting is a right, not a privilege, and these two sacred documents protect the sanctity of each one of our votes. Many of the state's registered voters are elderly, disabled, and poor, or have specialized conditions that would completely prohibit them from ever attaining a valid voter ID. And because of that, their voting privilege would be denied. Here's some data that none of you probably are aware. 1/3 of our members are independent voters, 1/3 of our members are independent voters, and 1/3 of our members are Republican voters. And these folks vote in nearly all elections, while other demographics fail to reach our goals. Now, there are conditions that would use provisional voting. Let me tell you a little bit about provisional voting. Provisional voting only occurs when there is some doubt about a voter's presence, his or her identity, or when he or she cannot be found in the precinct vote, or there is some other dispute concerning the voters. For example, the election officer cannot find the voter's correct precinct. That voter is entitled to vote, but only provisionally. Once the election is concluded, all ballots have been returned to the election office and counted and verified, then provisional ballots are administered at a later point in time if necessary. In other words, if the election is very close and those provisional ballots could make a difference, then those ballots are closely inspected for authentication and found to be appropriate are then counted. If the voter would not get his or her vote counted, then there's no guarantee that the bill would approve this process. Moreover, a whole new provisional process would have to be created, which would be further confusion if this bill should become law. More than 8 years ago, the Supreme Court of Missouri ruled this kind of issue unconstitutional, and this attempt remains so today. In the state of Missouri, our election laws are some of the toughest in the nation. When the voter comes to the vote, our election verification process guarantees that a voter is or he or she says it. Because of that, we have very little, if any, problems. The right to free and open elections is the basis of a democratic republic, denying even one person the right to vote, even hundreds of thousands, shakes the foundation of a free society. Every citizen of the state of Missouri and the United States of America is guaranteed certain freedoms by our constitutions, and voting is one of those freedoms, and nothing should ever prevent that fundamental right from being denied. Thank you very much.
Any other, any questions for that witness? No? Guess not. Anybody else to testify in, against?
Good afternoon. My name is Martha Ott, and I'm the Legislative Action Chair of the League of Women Voters in Missouri. And I want to confirm with you that we have not changed our position, and we have been fighting this also for 10 years here in Missouri and all across the United States and other states, states in here that have happened in the last few years. I'm not going to talk too much about the league, but you know that we've been around for almost 100 years after women got the right to vote, and it took us almost 100 years to get that right. And so now we're back again trying to preserve that right for every citizen to vote. I have a little story here I want to tell. I never saw my birth certificate until I was 24 years old. I was born at my grandmother's house in Southeast Missouri with a local doctor delivered me, I guess. And my mother had something called a certificate of birth, and I thought that was my birth certificate. So when I had booked a tour of Europe and had applied for my passport, I took that certificate of birth to the passport office, and lo and behold, they said, this is not a legal document. You have to have a real birth certificate stamped with the Missouri seal on it. And well, you can guess how I felt, because I thought, oh my gosh, I've put down money, maybe I don't have a birth certificate. Well, anyway, they gave me the information, who to call in Jefferson City. I called, they looked it up, and lo and behold, I did have a birth certificate. So I'm really proud of that doctor who delivered me, who reported my birth. And they said, well, we can send you the birth certificate. And I said, no, don't send it to me. I am coming today itself. And so that's how I got my birth certificate, that's how I got my passport, and that's how I got to Europe tonight. So I want to explain that because I'm not that old, and I think there's many people in Missouri who were probably born like me and my 3 older sisters, not in a hospital, but at home or at our grandmother's house. And so I think there's people who probably were born who did not ever, the birth was never recorded and would have odds of getting a birth certificate today. So anyway, I want to share that story with you and think about that, those people who are my age, maybe a little bit older, a little bit younger, that did not have that birth recorded. Thank you.
Questions for witness? Yes, quick question.
Do you have a driver's license?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a passport, or I did have it before it expired.
Any other questions for witness? Thank you. Anyone else to testify against?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I'll be brief and try to honor, Chair of this vicious early. I'm Clyde Williams. I'm with the NAACP, Missouri State Conference of Branches, and we oppose both HJR 1 and House Bill 30. Here in this venue today, we heard arguments against the piece of legislation, and I'm not going to try to regurgitate my answer to that. I would encourage you to look at how we can, and I mean we for being inclusive of everyone, to get more people to vote and to disenfranchise those from enacting their constitutional rights. However much cost can that energy go towards how can I get more than 20% of voting process to an election? How can I get 50%, more than 50% to an election? Let's use our monies and resources to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for witness? Thank you very much. Anyone else testify against?
I'm not representing any group, I'm representing this group.
Sure.
Okay. My name is Marilyn McLeod, I'm a resident of Columbia, Missouri, and I am against this bill. I was going to say a few things about the problems that women have. That's already been said about students. I know in Columbia we have thousands of students who may be disenfranchised, which is heartbreaking, especially to try to get young people to be engaged in political matters. No matter what party, no matter what they vote, we want them to vote. I sure do. I do want to say though that the concern about fraud, and that, you know, human beings are flawed. There are always going to be some people who try to fool the system. They try to rob a bank. You're not going to close the banks or stop people from going into the banks to use them. On the Missouri voter registration application, it outlines the fact that if you give incorrect information, you're guilty of perjury to register, and there are fines of up to $10,000 and possibility of imprisonment for up to 5 years. So there's plenty of stuff on the books for anybody who might engage in fraud. So I would hope that you vote against this. I think the most important thing is to have people vote. Just last week's election, only 15% of people, I believe, in Boone County voted, which is just pitiful. One of the elections had 2 people running, and they each got 12 votes in one of the small towns. So if one more person had voted, now what if they were stopped from voting because they didn't have their ID? So I hope that you will consider this. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else testify against House Bill 30 and HJR 1? Seeing none, anyone to testify for informational purposes only on House Bill 30 and HJR 1? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing on House Bill 30 and HJR 1 and close the public hearing. Committee, I would like, we don't usually vote on the same day. This is the last week we've determined House consent bills. There are the first 3 that we've heard are all consent bills. I would like to go into executive session and work on those. I also would like to give you a list. We will probably have an executive session Wednesday. I would like to give you a list of the bills that I'm thinking about so you will know what those are going to be. Okay? So I'll make a motion to go into executive session. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we are now in executive session. First bill I will bring up is House Bill 1052. This was the one that Representative Miller did on surveyors and easements. No one was against it. It's passed the House consent. I was making a motion, I will make a motion to do pass House Bill 1052. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? No, I guess roll call. Roll call, please.
Senators Wasson.
Aye.
Cunningham. Aye. Hageman.
Aye.
Kraus.
Aye.
Riddle. Aye. Sater. Aye. Wallingford.
Aye.
Wheelan.
Aye.
Kevney.
Aye.
Lavota.
Aye.
Sitton.
Okay, you have voted. Gentlemen, you have voted House Bill 1052. I will leave it open to Senate for Senate as long as the vote does not change. You have do passed it. I will make a motion that House Bill 1052 go consent. But here's a second. Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Senators Wasson.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Hageman.
Aye.
Kraus.
Aye.
Riddle. Sater.
Aye.
Wallingford.
Aye.
Wheelan.
Aye.
Kevney.
Aye.
Lavota.
Aye.
Sitton.
Okay, you have voted House Bill 1052 consent. Next is Senate Committee Substitute for House Bill 1098 by Representative Crawford. Changes in laws regarding trust companies was a fairly simple bill, came out of the House consent. I would make a motion we do pass Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 1098. Oh, I'm sorry, you are so right. That's why you're the minority floor leader. That's why you get the high pay. I apologize. We have to go to adopt Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 1098. Yeah, it is Senate Committee Substitute. All right, that motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. You have now adopted it. Now, I will make a motion. Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 1098 be passed. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, got a roll call. I'm getting out. Roll call, please.
Senators Wasson.
Aye.
Cunningham. Hageman.
Aye.
Kraus.
Aye.
Riddle. Sayer.
Aye.
Wallingford.
Aye.
Wheeland.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Lavota.
Aye.
Sifton.
Okay, by 10-0, you have voted to pass Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 1098. I now make a motion for it to go consent.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Senators Wasson.
Aye.
Cunningham. Hageman.
Aye.
Kraus.
Aye.
Riddle.
Aye.
Sayer.
Aye.
Wallingford.
Aye.
Wheeland.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Lavota.
Aye.
Sifton.
Okay, you have voted 10-0, voted House Bill Senate Committee Substitute House Bill 1098 consent. Next is House Bill 979, Tony Duggars. This one was the bonding requirement for the treasurer of Southern Director School District. I will make a motion to pass HB 979. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any discussion? This is the one that just involved a few school districts, I think. It wasn't any big deal. If there is no discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Roll call again. God dang, I'm getting out of whack. Roll call. We did so well for an hour and a half. All right, roll call. For good pass.
Senators Wasson.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Hageman.
Aye.
Kraus.
Aye.
Riddle. Sayer.
Aye.
Wallingford.
Aye.
Wheeland.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Lavota.
Aye.
Sifton.
By your vote of 10, you have voted to pass HB 979. Now we'll make a motion that HB 979 go consent.
Second.
It has been seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Senators Wasson.
Aye.
Cunningham. Hageman.
Aye.
Kraus.
Aye.
Riddle. Sayer.
Aye.
Wallingford.
Aye.
Wheeland.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Lavota.
Aye.
Sifton.
By your vote of 10, you have voted HB 979 consent. Now, Wednesday, I would like to look at, Dan Brown was asking, we've held his bill for quite some time. This bill was a bill that it had a $2 million fiscal note. It makes a lot of sense. It's just whether, and I guess the way Dan put it to me, how much is the people being able to both work? What it amounted to was if, the example that was given during the hearing was when Jason Smith vacated his state rep position to run for Congress. There was a very small group of, I think, 40-some people that picked the next state rep. That state rep was then soundly beaten in the following election. He wants to not have the committee people pick the state rep. He wants it to go to a primary. A primary would be called 45 days out from the election, and we would have a primary. There is a $2 million fiscal note on the bill. That's why I've held it this long. But I think he does deserve you guys having your say. So I will be bringing that bill up. If you want to look at it, it is Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 117. If you want to look at it, and I think the committee substitute, the only change I remember is if there is one person running, there will be no primary. And that is the substitute. Okay? Next is Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 289. This is the Senator Schott's bill that he brought along the same lines. I will tell you that bill, he deals with everybody that Dan Brown's bill does not. He deals with all the county officials underneath those state people. If there is a vacancy, he does not like the governor appointing, well, no, I'm going to say that. He does ask the governor to appoint, he wants us to advise and consent. That's a lot of advising and consent in the Senate, is all I'm going to say. But I understand his situation, I understand his reason, and I promised him that this committee would deal with the bill. So it is 289, Senate Bill 289, if you want to look at it between now and Wednesday. That's what it does. If the county commissioner vacates for whatever reason, death, quits, goes to jail, whatever, there's now an opening. Today, the governor would appoint that person. In this bill, the governor would appoint that person, but the Senate's advice and consent.
Approximately how many advice and consents would you have?
You know, I think if you look statewide, I would bet you, I'm guessing, but I would bet there's 3, 4, 5, 6 of those a year. I would doubt. When you go all the way down the line, the auditor, the treasurer, the clerk, everybody, I would say there's several of you.
Probably less more than 10.
Well, that's a good point. If it was less than 10, I mean, we don't do the best job of getting advice and consent for this building, but if it was 40, I think it would be a problem for sure. If it was less than, that's probably a really good thing to ask. I don't know. That's probably a really good thing to ask. But I will try to get that answer for Wednesday. Next is Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 338. No, 338. That's Senator Gunslingers, where it changed a lot of the political committee stuff. That has been changed on many. I can't tell you what it's actually going to say because I don't have the final version yet. I will explain that to you Wednesday, but I think it's going to be a lot smaller than it was when you heard. Yeah, I'll try to get you a copy of it as quick as they get it to me. I don't have it yet, so as soon as they get it to me, I'll get it to you. But it's going to be quite a bit small.
I just know that there's a lot of concern about that bill when it first came up. Not saying substitute doesn't take care of concerns.
Right, and I'll get it to you as quickly as I can. Next is Senator Honors establishes paper ballots. You've all heard that the last couple of years. So I think you understand that issue probably. I'm going to leave that up to you guys, what you want to do with it. Next is Senator Krause's poll challenges, poll centers. And I'll bring both of those up. You guys decide what you want to do. You've heard both of those bills fairly recently. Yeah, poll center, Joe and I, Will, we've all talked about it. How much of it is their job to go and be involved in what actually counts in the votes? I don't know. Will has brought up some language that kind of makes it sound like they have more of the ability to do that involved than I thought, to be honest with you. And then you have kind of changed your thinking on it somewhat. So I will leave that up to the committee. The only other thing that we will probably look at is one of the bills, there are two bills we heard today, would be the early vote or the voter ID. I will probably bring that up Wednesday as well. So that's what we've got in line, and that's kind of what I plan to do. I didn't want to put those on you. Some of them you haven't heard in a while. One or two of you heard just today. I didn't want you to have to vote on them today, although, my gosh, you guys are good on time. You're the best committee in the world on time. But I thought I'd give you some time to think about those bills. We'll look at them Wednesday. Other than that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
I'll take that.
This is